Hey everybody, welcome back. This is Shane with Shane Media. Today we're going to discuss Terrifier 2. Let's get into it. Alright guys, so before I go any further, I think it's important that I let everybody listening to this video know that I am a pretty hard sell with slasher movies. I love them. They're one of my favorite subgenres. Halloween is my favorite horror movie of all time. The 80s was full of fun movies to watch. The 90s was good. In fact, I think every decade has given us good slasher movies. But I also believe that with each new decade, horror movies, especially slashers, have progressively matured. And as a byproduct of that, audiences have raised their expectations. We have higher standards now. Especially from where we were at in the 80s. And don't get me wrong, I'm one of those people who loves the 80s slashers. I mean, Halloween's my favorite horror movie of all time, and even though it predates the 80s, obviously, it is the movie that kicked the door open for that entire subgenre. And I think it's one of the most fun and rewatchable decades that horror has ever had, at least in my opinion. I mean, they are a blast. There's also a reason why critics and even the general movie-going audience has never taken these movies serious. They don't have a lot of substance. Generally, you've got a cool killer on screen and you've got a bunch of brutal kills. You've just got a bunch of kill scenes stitched together by very poor dialogue and not much else. And even though I wouldn't trade these movies for anything because, like I said, they are so fun and they've left such a cool timestamp in filmmaking history that I would never want to get rid of them or forget about them. But I think it's okay to progress from there. I think it's okay to say, yeah, those movies were great for what they were, but let's move forward. But obviously what made that era of horror movies so iconic and so memorable was the horror icons, the horror villains we got. We got Michael Myers, we got Chucky, we got Freddy, we got Pinhead, we got Jason. And people loved that. It left a stamp on the pop culture consciousness. And since then, in the 90s, we got we got Ghostface, and we got the Hook guy from I Know What You Did Last Summer, and we got Jigsaw in the early thousands, but we haven't really had a horror icon that left quite the mark. It hasn't left its stamp in the way that those 80s slashers did. And I think audiences, especially now so since Stranger Things, we went through that sort of 80s Renaissance throwback era with TV and movies, and I think it revitalized people's passions for that style of horror. And everybody wants to see this generation's Michael Myers, this generation's Freddy Krueger and Pinhead. And I think they wanted that so bad that they were desperate and willing to crown the first thing that came along. In fact, I'll even go one step further, guys, and please, this is just my opinion, don't get mad at me, but I truly believe that if we were in a time where we were getting a lot more original slasher-centric horror movies, that because of how poorly scripted, poorly acted, and mediocre the rest of this movie as a whole is, I think Art the Clown probably would have got lost under the radar. I don't think he'd be getting nearly the recognition he's getting right now, and I think he would have been very forgettable. Now, I do believe he probably would have found his fans. I think his movies would have become cult classics over time to, a certain niche of the horror community, but I don't think he would be getting crowned as greatest slasher of the last 20 years. Now guys, please, please, please don't twist my words. I am not saying that Art is not a good horror villain. I'm not saying he isn't fun to watch, and I'm definitely not saying he won't or even can't become a horror icon. In fact, I'm not saying any of that. In fact, the most positive thing I have to say about this movie is Art himself. Between David Howard Thornton's performance and Damien Leone's direction, I think the utilization of Art was actually done pretty effectively in this movie. Everything from his creepy smile to his body language to his mannerisms, I think everything was pretty spot on. And another thing that I think is noteworthy is the perfect combination, the perfect balance they found for camp and brutality with this character. I liked that from moment to moment, you never knew what this dude was capable of. I mean, one minute he's laughing and smiling and waving at you, and the next he's cutting your eyes out of your head. I mean, the intensity they brought and the unexpected nature of this character was just done pretty freaking good, if you ask me. And going along with that, I think another thing you have to applaud this movie for is the creativity in the kills. Both movies, actually. This one's obviously a lot bloodier, which is crazy because that first one was pretty bloody too, especially that one scene. But you can tell they were more ambitious with this movie. Like, they went into this movie with one goal, and it was to be as bloody as possible and put their practical effects on display. And I think they did a good job with that. It's like when they were making this movie, they wanted to make sure that nobody walked away from this movie disappointed with the gore. So if you're the type of horror fan that goes into them for kills and gore, you are going to be highly pleased with this movie. I really don't see how you couldn't be. But if you're somebody like me who does like gore and does like kills, but you need a little bit more from a movie before you're going to crown it as a great movie, then you're probably going to be in the same camp as me, and you'll be scratching your head wondering how on earth this movie is getting the level of praise that it's been getting since its release. Which moves me right into my negatives. Yep, that's right, guys. The positives are over. That is the end of the good things I have to say about this movie, unfortunately. And I really wanted to like this movie. I didn't really care for the first one, but all of the reviews I was reading and watching were saying this movie was such an improvement from the first one. And I agree. I am not going to disagree with that. I did enjoy this movie more than the first one. At least there was some semblance of a story in this movie. At least you can tell they attempted to give us actual characters with actual motivations in this movie. But unfortunately, guys, even with that being said, this movie fell pretty flat for me. I don't hate it. I just think it's kind of forgettable. And for me, rewatch value plays a big part in how I rate a movie, and this movie just doesn't have a lot of that for me. Having a cool killer is fun for the first, few minutes, but if I'm going to invest myself into a 90-minute, or in this case, a 2-hour movie, I need a little bit more to keep my attention, guys. I need more than cool kills and gore. I need characters I can latch onto. I need a plot that I can latch onto. And there was none of that. And like I said, there was a semblance of those things in this movie, but it was so surface level and shallow that it wasn't gripping or captivating at all. I mean, there was nothing else in this movie that was keeping me drawn in. And I'm not a gore hound. I'm not a guy who just wants to basically see a bunch of kill scenes edited together with poorly written dialogue stitching it all together. I mean, see my thoughts on Halloween Kills. That was my biggest problem with that movie, and it was double, triple, quadrupled down in this movie. I mean, every problem I had with Halloween Kills was tenfold with this movie. So, yeah, I just couldn't, I can't walk out of this movie with anything really great to say about it. And that sucks. It really does. Like I said, I wanted to love this movie, guys, but I'm not going to lie to you and say that I did when I just didn't. But just because I wasn't a fan of this movie doesn't mean I want it to fail. In fact, just the opposite. I always have and I always will champion independent filmmakers. So I love the fact that this movie even exists. I'm excited that it's exceeding its box office expectations. I'm excited that it's succeeding financially the way it is. And even though this movie wasn't for me, I'm going to keep seeing these movies as they come out for that reason alone, because I want him to succeed. I want everybody involved in this movie to succeed. And who knows, guys, the next movie might impress me so much that it retroactively changes my opinion of the first two movies. Who knows? It's happened. I know I've loved movies and the sequel made that movie worse, and then I've hated movies and the sequel actually made that movie better. So you never know what can happen, so I'm not going to count it out just yet. But for a rating, guys, I'm going to go ahead and give this movie a 5 straight across the board. But anyways, that's it for this video. Please go like and share, and if you haven't already, please subscribe, and I will catch you guys in the next one.